Hey, what's up, guys? You are listening to the Edge and Flow podcast. This is Lucas Burnley, and I'm here with my co host, TJ Schwartz. This is officially our last podcast of the year of our Lord 2023. And we're going to do a little bit of like reminiscing, I think. We'll recap.
2017 is coming up on 7 years ago. Think about that. I saw that somewhere. 2017 is almost 7 years ago.
You know, movies are the ones that catch me now. Because I'll be like, I'll watch something, I'm like, wait, this came out in 2008? And you're like, CGI is still good, or like, film quality is really good. Like, I can
coming up on 20 years ago.
You know it if you're watching Die Hard, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, oh yeah, this is different. This is like 90s. Not so.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
Time, man. But yeah, how's your year been?
This year's been a lot. Overall, man, like coming into the end of the year, I'm feeling like super positive. I feel
Good.
I feel very energized. I feel a lot like I feel hopeful. Like there's a lot that I'm excited about. I don't know. It's like always, this one is always like a hard question where it's like my brain has the right amount of like interest and drive, I feel like. And coming at the end of the year, I feel like that is auspicious. What about you?
Oh, it was a quick year, man. Like the way it just like flew.
Yeah.
It's crazy, of course. It's always going to be that way, but it was a growth year for the family, I think. I wrote a little like Christmas letter that we mailed out, and I just kept thinking about growth in general, just in so many ways, not just like the obvious ways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a little bit of like weariness of growth addiction too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like growth means change, and like maybe change isn't always good. You know what I mean? So it's like a little bit of a double check reflection right now to make sure we don't like, I don't know, step on the gas harder than we need to. But
yeah, growth for growth's sake is not the goal, right?
But I mean, it was a good year though. We're happy.
Well, and right now you are literally in a growth phase, right? Like because of the business and like the age of the babies, I mean, you are not static.
Right.
I think like one of the reasons I'm feeling so excited right now is I think I'm actually coming out of an intentional non-growth stage, right? Because I think that for a while we had pushed so hard. And when I say like a while, I mean, it's like 5 years of pushing really hard and a year or two of kind of a slowdown, which was very like, it's uncomfortable, but I think it was really necessary. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy too, because it's like, it doesn't always, like, I think at a certain point, even if you make an intentional decision to like slow down or not push, you're already doing so much that it doesn't feel different. I think it has a positive effect, but I don't think it's like it's not like a drastic change where you're like, oh man, like this is great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's always so conflicting, because it's like, I can see the results of having just, like, you hear people call it a forward center of mass. Like, you're always falling forward. So if you trip, you're still going forward. You know what I mean? Like, always forward. Yeah. And it is not untrue. Like, in my experience, that is 100% true. But sometimes I wonder if I should be standing still more often. But at the same time, I'm like, it feels pretty good to move forward as well. I don't know. That's just, that conundrum's what's on my mind. But I
think the standing still thing, and this end of the year for me is usually, it's like it's fairly reflective. Like, I spend a lot of time in my head. I'm not incredibly sentimental around like holidays or like birthdays or anything like that as it relates to myself. But I think I'm really sensitive to the changing of seasons. And I don't mean that in like the direct way. Like, I think I just I think that, seasons of life, business, childhood, like all these things, like I feel those more than I feel like, oh, it's Christmas again, And so I kind of look at it, I'm looking at my kids like coming into Christmas now, and like and that makes me just like see the whole year in retrospect. And like, it's like all, Bo went from preschool to kindergarten this year, and it's like, I look at him now and you don't have an iPhone. So let me ask you this. Does your non-iPhone give you tailored photo albums set to music?
Yes. Google
does
Photos.
Does that affect you in any way?
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, that one is like, we are essentially the first generation, I think, that has
get the instant replay.
But curated, like, hey, here's days at the beach set to a smooth jazz. And you're like, oh man, like I don't need that. It's Tuesday. Like, like I don't need that right now.
Yeah.
So it's a weird one. I don't even know where I was going with that. That's just like a tangent. But the idea of like, I think of standing still. So end of the year retrospective, I think that you and I, when we first started talking about doing this, it was like, oh, should we like write some things down from the year? I never track anything. And I think that coming into the end of the year this year is different because I actually have tracked things. I've tracked things that I want to do. I've tracked like some successes. I've tracked financial things because of like multiple conversations around the fact that I was not acknowledging good things happening. I was only pushing. So I think that as like a method of standing still is something that is effective if you are the type that wants to push.
I like what you just said about acknowledging good things that are happening.
Yeah.
Because that's something I'm not good at.
Dude, there's a lot there. So I recently, like, I had like kind of end of year meetings with my accountant and my my business coach. And what was interesting to me was we had like some parallel conversations, totally unrelated, where that kind of came up, which was like, dude, you're super hard on yourself. And here's some things that like I saw happen throughout the year for you. Can you like acknowledge that? And it's like, I have a response to it because I don't want to.
Yeah.
So I think that if you track it, what's cool about that is you actually don't really have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, like you can just see it. And I think there is in there, like there's enough value to be, even if it's just from the standpoint of like, oh, I would like to do less of that next year or more of that next year. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
I think one thing that would be wise would be, I've not been one to journal, but I want to try it because I noticed I basically never write like self-reflectively at all. But I wrote that little Christmas letter, and I think that's what jogged my mind about this is I wrote like a little small, like 2 or 3 sentence paragraph about each of the people in our family and like what happened this year. And so I'm like, well, I have to write one about me. I'm like, then it was like the first time I ever sat in a long time where I was like, what did I do this year? Like, what are the good things that people want to know that I did? And
do you draw a blank?
Yeah.
Like at first, do you draw a blank?
It's like the instant response is like, what did I do? And then it's like, oh yeah. I mean, we hired an employee. That's kind of new. Like things been going good. And then I start to roll a little bit. I'm like, yeah, things did happen, but I just don't. I think journaling might be smart in terms of recall of like success and
it kind of cuts through the bullshit.
Yeah,
and in that being your own, right? It kind of eliminates. It eliminates the ability to not acknowledge your work.
And I gotta say, I think part of it is, I think I overcompensate for having been overly optimistic in the past. You know what I mean? Like having been overly optimistic and then it doesn't pan out. Like you get your hopes up, you see a few things, a few possibilities, they don't work out. that happens a few times. And then now I feel like I look at everything as like guaranteed not to work out, total shock if it does,
Right.
moving on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's that big swing, right? And
Yeah.
then the next variation is probably just like like I would rather be excited with like an air towards realistic
Yeah.
than just be like negative, because
Yeah.
why are you going to do anything if you're like, well, this isn't going to work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then it's a surprise. Like
Yeah.
I mean, that's why people play the lottery. They're like, this is going to work. And
Yeah.
you get to feel good for a little while.
Mhm.
It's different when you're making like calculated decisions.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I have a hunch that if you were to look back, what you were considering things that did not work were probably learning experiences, and they
Yeah.
were not failures,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like, didn't lose the house gambling,
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I had a grandfather who did.
Oh, geez. That's
So I
rough.
don't know. I don't know if it was at Christmas, but man, can you imagine
Right.
explaining that one?
Yeah. Blunder like that. Yeah.
It's a bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So do you do like any kind of like year-end recap for yourself, like kind of to this idea of tracking, right? If you're not tracking or not journaling, do you take stock at the end of the year in anything?
I'm a numbers guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm an Excel spreadsheet guy.
Ugh.
I'm in an Excel spreadsheet every day, one or the other or the other. I've got like all these different accounting ones. And so it's like by the end of the year, I'm always comparing all the numbers to all the previous years, all the quarters to all the previous quarters, all the months to all the previous months. That's like
Okay.
a constant for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the year, it's like I'm curious to see the annual result, but I'm basically looking at it like all the time. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm watching it materialize. So it's not like somebody print out the numbers and give it to me and be totally surprised or interested. It's like I already know
You kind of,
what's
yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Right.
But like that, like the annual differential, like trying to grow a business, and like that's something that I do take stock of. But like, I think it's important to realize that that is not necessarily the measure of what we're trying to achieve either. You know what I mean? I think, which is what I was talking about when I write a letter, is like, I'm not going to write like financial achievements. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
these are our fourth quarter numbers, like
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I have to say something that's more like tangible, like that was like a human level success, that was like an enjoyable moment. And it's like, those are the things that I'm slower to take account of, I
Well,
guess,
and this,
because
I
they're
mean,
not
this here's
numbers.
like the brutal truth of that, right? Which is like where you put your attention
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
what gets, taken care of.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so parable, or I guess like, tying this in, like doing the daily tracking stuff. Terrence, my coach, was like, hey, like, dude, you can't have everything be work.
Mm-hmm.
And I instantaneously realized it, because I'm like, well, if I'm saying I want to like do all these things and like be a better dad and like a better partner and all of this, but everything on my like priority list surrounds like some type of work mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can say anything I want, it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like just the simple act of like writing a letter can, I think, show you areas where you're like, oh, I want to like tweak this a little bit, or that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. It's just,
Yeah.
it's the ability to slow down and like just kind of bird's eye view what you're doing, I think, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, that's
You think it's
for
just
sure.
human. Is that just human? It's like human condition. Have we been doing that forever? Like people get to the end of the year and they're cold and they're like, oh, I wish I would have got more firewood, or like,
Yeah.
I wish I wouldn't have
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to me that like we're preparers. Like
Right.
people are biological preparers. Like
Right.
it's it's kind of like you look at the bear that hibernates, the squirrel that gets all the nuts. Like
Right.
humans are doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So it's like when you go into an industrialized economy, we have this tendency to still do it, even though it's like you can still buy bananas in December.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
It's weird.
it's yeah. I think there's some stuff going on there for sure. But yeah, uh, I think it'll be a really good year in 2024 because I'm feeling optimistic, but I think I want to start to view it through multiple lenses.
Differing from how you viewed it this year, like
Yeah,
going
yeah,
into next year, you have
yeah, yeah,
a different criteria than you did this year,
yeah, yeah,
not just as it relates to work.
yeah, yeah. I think in general, I think I feel pretty good in about 2023 how physically things actually went, but I could have had a better outlook. That's like how I feel
Like
about it.
like just from a
Could have had a
like
better mental uh state. Not
really.
that it was like really bad. It's just like could have been more appreciative, more
Do you do
like
any kind of like
grateful.
gratitude practice?
See, that's the thing. Not anything like super intentional.
Yeah. Um, I really like the 5-minute journal.
Mm,
It's a cool concept. I love things that are kind of plug and play because I think with like ADHD, like I can get so bogged down in like how the system operates that
mm,
designing the system, I it can kind of like blow the fuse for me. And
yeah.
so when I find something where I'm like, oh, like this is the information that I need presented in a way that I understand and I can just apply it. The
Mm,
5-minute journal is one of those things where like you just do the work. And I did them for a few years. I haven't done them in a long time, but I think it starts to put into perspective a practice that is functional, which is
yeah.
like you're writing in the morning, right? So you're like basically writing like, 3 things you're excited about, like 3 things you're grateful for kind of thing. And you do the same thing at the end of the day. And I think that just as a practice, a baseline practice,
Mm,
that can be a really good one. And sometimes it's like, I mean, it's literally just like, dude, I'm just grateful I have this cup of coffee. I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
you put pressure on practices that maybe doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
And I don't know that everybody does that, but I think that as I've been working in this idea of like everydays again, I realize I'm like, man, it doesn't matter. Like the thing that I'm doing today doesn't have to be the best. I don't have to be the most
Hmm.
focused. It's the consistency.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
did it. Right. Like I
Yeah.
noticed it around the gym where when I would go to the gym 3 days a week, I think I felt the need to like push a little bit harder sometimes. And looking back, I injured myself more frequently than I like, I haven't been, knock on wood, I haven't been injured since I've been doing 5 days a week,
Hmm.
which doesn't really make sense. Except I just think that I think it creates a little bit of a buffer where I'm like, no, I'm here to do the work. I'm not here to like push.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to be able to do this work tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that is
Sustainability.
just
Yeah.
sustainability of a
Yeah.
practice, right? And
Yeah.
like figuring out the like baby steps. I don't know. I think I told you this. Like I feel like this year more than most, like there's a bunch of things that are kind of like coalescing.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, like this concept and like this practice and like, these habits are like
Hmm.
working and like being more synchronized. I had sent you, I think a James Clear quote a while back, right? Which was if you ignored your goals, do your process. I don't want to start with that one. Do they lead to the same end result?
Hmm.
Right. So if you took the goal, if you're like, oh, I want financial freedom, I want to retire when I'm 50. Well, if you didn't have that goal, but you worked the way that you're working and saved the way that you're saving, would you end up at the same place?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, are you on the course that you think
Are
that
you
you
on the
are?
course?
Yeah.
Do the small
Or
steps
that you
lead
want to
up
be
to
on?
the larger change?
Yeah.
And I had never crossed paths with him before I had heard that quote. And he wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And as soon as I put those two things together, I was like, oh, I know that I've read like quotes from that. I recognize the name. He popped up in Masterclass, which
Mm-hmm.
I love. For you, like right now, Masterclass has like I think they're doing like a 50%, so you can get like you and a friend an
Yeah.
account.
Yeah.
Non-sponsored, I paid for it. Like, but that's basically what he's talking about is like the 1% change, and you just realize you're like, if you take the pressure off of actually making big changes
Mm-hmm.
and just do that like micro consistency,
Yeah.
I almost don't know how you are successful over the long term if you don't do something like that intuitively, if it wasn't
Yeah.
like searched out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just feel like the people that are very successful are probably doing that some way in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, I'm down for a good metaphor.
Lay it on
Always.
me.
I remember this from like my childhood elk hunting. So
Mm-hmm.
if you've ever hiked around in the trees and been on game trails, you'll know that like game trails have like a weaving pattern on a hillside, like on a
Mm-hmm.
slope, where they're like it's literally like there's layers of them going upward at an angle, and then the opposite direction there's layers of them going upward at an angle the other way. So you get like a pattern almost like expanded metal. You know what I mean?
I
Of like a
love it.
ladder.
I've stared at them many, many times.
Yeah, yeah, and when you're elk hunting, you don't walk on ridges because you're skylined, so you
Right.
always side hill. And I can remember as a pretty young kid, like knowing that I'm in the trees, I can't see where I'm going, but I know we're just going to eventually break, crest a ridge, and go to this other side. And every time I would be on the game trail and I would see the next fork, you have up and down, and it's only a tiny bit up, like 1 degree angle up or 1 degree angle down,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to see that like every I don't know 50 feet to 100 yards. And it was like the realization that like if I always take the one that's like 1 degree up instead of 1 degree down, I'm gonna gain like a few thousand feet in elevation with like over a matter of hours and not even realize it. But because it's like if you take a few of the 1 degree downs, you're going backwards and then forwards and backwards and forwards, but you can't see where you're going because you're in the trees. And I don't know how that applies exactly, but I just remember that, and I still think about that when I'm like doing anything. Is like take the one that's about 1 degree up forward, and
I
you'll
think
end up.
that I think that ties in perfectly, and I also think that that may be the best metaphor of the year.
Well,
That dude,
I
I mean
squeezed it
that
in.
you fit that one in. I don't know if you've been saving
Yeah.
that up. That's a metaphor. I mean, that really you're talking about growth and consistently pushing and wanting to slow down. You did not realize that you were well, I mean, you realize you were probably going up, but like
Mm,
it did not come at a cost. And I think that
yeah.
that coming through the year is maybe one of my big takeaways, which is if I am actually too hard on myself, and if I actually do have a hard time acknowledging accomplishments, and yet I am always pushing and feeling like I need to push more, like that as a change where you're like, okay, maybe I can not worry about pushing so much
Mm,
and actually just take like the fork that takes me a degree up.
yeah. Yeah.
I feel like overall what you and I are trying to do as it relates to like self and like satisfaction of creativity and also family
Hmm.
as it relates to business, I feel like that is like a very decent path.
Yeah. 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 And I think maybe what's missing is like in that metaphor, you get to these points where you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, the truck looks
Right.
microscopic. Like I'm
Right.
like 1,500 feet above the truck. Have you ever had those moments where
Yeah.
you're just walking and walking and you're not going like straight up? So you don't
Yeah.
really feel like you're going up. And then you look back and you're like, the road is just way below you.
Yes. Flow state
It,
because you're
yeah.
psyched to be on a trail.
But I think it's
Like,
important, like, look back. You know what I mean?
oh,
Like,
okay.
look back.
I like it.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, man. I mean, why are I don't know. I love metaphors. I love analogies. I love stereotypes in a way
Mhm.
because I think it's like it appeals to my sense of efficiency in a way. and storytelling where you're like, okay, I get it. Like that's a much better way of explaining it to me than showing me like a percentile change, over, a decade with, compound interest. It's a more interesting, because I, unlike you, am not a numbers guy. So learning, I don't know, man. I think that some of the things that like you want, they're so nebulous. And almost not having a goal. You're like, I think it was in the James Clear class that he'd phrase something of like, I want to be the type of person that, and for some reason, I don't set goals. Like I don't have like clear cut goals. I'm like, there's things that I kind of like, I see, but I've never had a business plan. I've never been like, I want to make this much money by this age, or I want to like my company to be at this point. And I almost feel like the concept of like, just allow like that, right? Like I want to be the type of person that can retire at 50 or 60 or whatever it is easier to build a plan around, because you're like, well, what do those people do? And you're like, okay, well, they're doing that. Like, what is the step that I can actually do today? I think the Fusion 360 has like put this into perspective for me a little while, because I struggled around creating massive blocks of time to like learn it, as opposed to like, chipping away at it and being okay with the fact that I was just chipping away at it. I don't know. I feel like, I feel like I'm ending the year with like a kind of a different tool set than maybe over the last 5 years. And I say 5 years because I think that's when 5 to 6 years ago, I think my toolkit changed from what it had been prior to that. And so I think I'm just kind of seeing like a culmination of some different life changes, business changes, skill sets, and just like general knowledge, I guess, and maybe values. And that feels pretty good.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Period of growth, and seems like you've changed directions a little bit too. It's like,
what do you, when you say that, like, what do you see?
It seems like, I don't know, you inject CAD into the way that you were operating.
Yeah.
It seems like it changes the recipe. It changes the process, which changes the product. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're modeling in CAD as opposed to hand prototyping and you're 3D printing, it's like the whole order of events is flip flopped. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's paradigm shift. I see three things which are interesting to me. As it relates specifically to Fusion. So in my work, I like when I learned to make knives, I loved early, I loved 80s to 2000s tacticals. Okay. So when I learned to hand make knives, a lot of them were actually made to look almost like a factory knife. I wanted like precision. I wanted a certain aesthetic. It's funny talking to my friend Nick Rossi, who is a very talented bladesmith. It's same for him. He's like, he just wanted to forge them, but he still wanted it. He's like, yeah, like you grew up looking at Emerson's, and you're like, so the lines are there, right? So I had this. In my case, those knives, I know they are better off. Like, I know that I can do them on the CNC in a way that actually suits what the product is. Right. But a lot of those, I would still like creatively, I would want to build them and I would do it by hand, but I didn't draw a CAD for them. Okay. So I think that what Fusion 360 does there is actually allow me to start to push those forward in a way that is interesting from a manufacturing standpoint, but also a creative standpoint. That step, because it's tied to efficiency, opens the door for me to have more time to build the things that don't actually fit into that box. And that is really exciting.
Yeah. It's like my dad says, systematize everything that can be so that you can humanize everything else.
I love that.
If you're going to put a chamfer on a part that is as perfect as you can achieve,
yeah,
why is the CNC mill not doing it?
Yeah,
You know
why?
what I mean?
And just because you can do it by hand doesn't mean that that's where your time is best spent.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's things the machine can't do. Why are you trying to replicate what the machine can do when you should be doing something the machine can't do? You know.
Are you familiar with I might butcher his last name, Peter Johansson, or is it Peter Johnson? It might be Peter Johnson. I think it's Peter Johnson. So he's a swordsmith.
Mm-hmm.
I look at him and the way like textures and patinas and like these micro is like you can't do that on CNC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you can't do it. That is where, to me, I've always struggled with the idea of like, and even as like a fully handmade maker, I kind of struggled around that concept of like it's better because it's made without machines. I think where that line hits for me is like it's better when it's thoughtfully designed and like the techniques are appropriately applied. Like I would much rather spend time doing patina and texture work than chasing a perfect chamfer.
Yeah. Or
on
bandsawing
on a wheel. And that's my own personal preference. And I realize there are people that in the work, that's what they want to do. They want to prove that they can be precise fully by hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but if you're willing to just say, I'm going to use the best tool for the job.
Yeah.
Bar none. Like just that's what I'm going to do. I think the fear of a lot of people is that, well, the CNC is going to be the best at everything.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's something being missed there that there's things that humans are far better at. And so there's things where your own hands are the best tool for that job.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're using like a stigma around a tool as the reason to use the tool.
Yeah.
Or not use the tool as opposed to like, is it the best tool? I mean,
can I give a really clumsy metaphor?
Okay.
This one specifically as it relates to process. You are cooking with a family member. This could be I'm envisioning either a mother-in-law or like a brother-in-law, something like that, right? And they grab a nonstick pan and a metal spatula.
Oh yeah.
Works fine. It's just not actually, it doesn't serve a purpose. And there's damage on the back end. And like, I think there's a lot of things where you look at that and you're like, the argument can be made that if the task is to, flip the eggs, the metal spatula is 100% fine.
But
I feel weird that I just talked about nonstick pans, but or kitchen knives. It's like, don't put it in the dishwasher. There's a point where like the dishwasher is a great tool. In the case of a handmade knife with a natural handle material, it's not the right tool.
Yeah.
Does the same end result. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Third part of how Fusion, I think, is directly impacting. I think that around factory collaboration, which is a significant portion of my business, right? And at this point, like honestly, legacy, like I look at it as a legacy project. I think that in there may be the largest paradigm shift, because originally you hand make the things, you take the prototype. There is a point where at this point, I don't necessarily want to use my very finite, creative, like super satisfying, inefficient making time, right? To design some of the products that I want to produce as a production model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a limbo phase where it's kind of making do with multiple systems. And I think that with having a better grasp of CAD, that the end product, we like touched on this a little bit, but like end product is better, workflow is better, but creativity is actually there because I see areas where I'm able to take risks and make quick changes. I'm 3D printing stuff right now because I want to see a very small change in a design.
Mm-hmm.
The design changes that are super annoying, taking them to a factory and working with them and being like, yeah, I do. And this is the tie-in, right? This is a degree change.
Mm-hmm.
I want that line changed by a degree.
Yeah.
I can see it. No one else cares.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Those three things tied together. Okay. The ability to be more productive, more efficient, and actually produce product that I love anyway. Right. But is not like from the business standpoint, like the most profitable area for me to spend my time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to design more efficiently and creatively, bookended by the fact that I might actually be able to do some forging and have the headspace to just like build the one-off things that I want to build that aren't well built in any other way.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Best tool for the job.
Best tool for the job.
Yeah.
Oh man. Is there anything you would have done different this year?
Yes, but they mostly have to do with, again, my perspective on things.
Totally.
Because I think my own skepticism, it's like it was a good year of me overriding skepticism and doing the things that like my calculations say are going to work, even though like there's the voices of like, oh, be careful, easy, don't overdo it, like you're gonna you're gonna get burned, like there's those
Right.
negative voices. I think
Yeah.
ignoring those negative voices, not just barely enough to actually do the thing,
Right.
but also to like shut them the F up, like for the following few months, you know what I mean? Of like, no, this is what we've decided we're going to do.
Right.
Like, no questioning. End of story. Like, it's just all about mindset for me. Is like, I wish I wouldn't have been so nervous about decisions that were already made. You know what I mean?
Sure. Because it works out in the end.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, but it's a good one to carry in. And I think there's some level of just experience and trust in yourself. Like after a while, like there are things now that I know at 40 about myself that I did not know at 20. And it makes perfect sense. Same person, same brain, different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I know areas that I have struggled with since I was 20. And I know areas where I'm like, it doesn't matter how much I struggle, I'm going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That there's some peace that comes in that. It's a small, I think there's small changes. And I think that like if you're an anxious person, like the tendency to like lean into your anxiety around certain things is going to be there unless you really do the work,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for me, I would say the exact same thing. I would say that the changes, the things like the big like building block stuff of the year all worked well. I think it would have been like refinement or like reframing
Mm-hmm.
around how much I stressed
Yeah.
about certain things.
Yeah. It's like I don't feel like the stress actually helped me. It was just
Right.
there. It was just static, just
Yeah.
sand in the gears, like it
Yeah.
didn't need to be there.
Yeah. Well, and then you stretch that out and you're like, did the stress help your family?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And like an argument can be made like, oh, like I was stressed, so I like got more done. That's what I'm starting to question. I think for a long time, that was kind of how I felt, which
Mhm.
is like, I feel like it's like almost like puritanical in
Mhm.
some sense of like, you have to work hard to be successful. And I'm not saying that you don't have to work hard. That's not what I'm saying. but it
It has
doesn't
to
have
be
to be like,
painful for it to be
yeah,
successful.
it has to
Yeah.
be uncomfortable and painful.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I'm starting to see as
Yeah.
different. And I do actually feel that a lot of my practices would were working towards that concept, but I
Mhm.
think my brain was still struggling around the idea of that it needed to be more painful
Yeah.
or like more time
Yeah.
intensive. And I think I'm just coming to the conclusion of like, no, like since I've been doing the every days, I somehow have more time. And if you had asked me at the beginning of the year if I had time to do the things that I'm doing every day, I would have unequivocally told you no.
Mhm.
Doesn't make sense. It's a reframe.
Yeah. There was more juice with another squeeze.
It's true.
Yeah. All right.
It's weird,
That's
man.
something I would love to. I might have to ask you more about that in a future episode.
What's that?
Finding more time.
Dude, just legitimately daily tracking app.
Mhm.
Pick the things that you want to do that you're like, okay, non-negotiable. Like what is non-negotiable? So that was something I did throughout the year. Because I have the tendency to lose things in the notebook, right? Like I come up with a
Mhm.
plan, it's a good plan, it's working. I'll do it for a month or two, and then it just fades. And it's not,
Mhm.
I'm not like, oh, there that thing goes. It's one day I remember that I was doing that thing.
Mhm.
And it's a month after I've stopped. And then
Yeah.
with my brain, it's like if I miss something, I have a really hard time restarting.
Mhm.
The dailies have helped with that because like I do an end of week check-in, and I'm like, all right, like I missed the gym one day. I'm like, oh, I still went 4 days. 4 days is better than no days. And it's easier to like restart it that next Monday.
Mhm.
So I would say that if I gave you like one thing where I was like, hey, try this, I actually think that would be it.
Good.
But
That's interesting.
I don't know what you're trying. I don't like, I guess it would be like you could do some gratitude, but that's not
Mhm.
really tangible.
Mhm.
So it's like, if you could right now, if you saw something, you're like, I would like to make a change. Like, do you see anything where you're like, I would like to make a change in this area?
Uh, Gym stuff, exercise been patchy. I feel like I've been eating well, so that's
Okay.
sustained me, but like it's not enough. Got to be more physical. Um, and then like you said, just like I would have borderline on calling it like meditation
Okay.
because it's like the RPM in my brain is like super high all
Yeah.
the time, and it's like I love it,
Yeah. So do
but
I.
it's an addiction, and
Yeah.
so
It's an
that's
addiction.
the thing is like I don't like even feel burnt out. Like that's not where this is coming from.
Yeah.
It's more of coming from like I think back and it's like at that kind of RPM, like my ability to take in the world around me is like very narrow.
Yeah.
And then it's like I feel like I'm missing things. You know what I mean? Like I feel like so.
Absolutely. so maybe that's where you find something. And like meditation is such an interesting one. So many different variations, times of day. Like Headspace app is great. Like if you did that, or you're like, all right, I'm
Headspace.
gonna, yeah, and because again, it's plug and play. You go in,
So
you do it.
what's interesting is there's a guy named Mike Skinner I've mentioned to you. He's
Uh-huh.
executive from some large companies, and he's been coaching my buddy Wilson Capron, who's friends with my
Uh-huh.
dad, and he's been on my dad's podcast and stuff. And he talks always about time journaling.
Yeah.
And when I heard him talk to them about it, he was because they bill by the hour, like that's sort of the
Right.
methodology of like the saddle making and bit and spur making. And
Oh,
so
really?
his mindset was maximizing their billable hours through time journaling
Okay.
to because there's, X amount of hours in the shop and then there's X amount of billable hours, which are not
Okay.
the same thing. And so he wanted them to journal what their overall hours versus billable hours was.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't bill by the hour, so it doesn't apply to me. But then now you're telling me this, and it makes me think like maybe my hours are more billable than I like to believe in a sense.
Yeah. It's just who
Because
you're paying that bill to.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
or who's paying
Yeah.
you
I might
rather.
have to talk to Mike about that. We might have to get Mike on here, honestly,
Dude,
too.
I would love to have him on here.
Yeah.
And I also think that I cannot like overemphasize how much value I have gotten through working with people that I respect,
Mm-hmm.
who are able to give like feedback. And for me, I actually really like to pay for it because I want to pick who I see. I want a coach that like I respect like what they have done and feeling like they're able to contribute something,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though a lot of it is sounding board.
Yeah.
No one can know like your priorities, your goals at an intimate level the way that you do, like, or intuit them, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to talk to someone who's able to reframe them or give some
Yeah.
clarity around maybe an emotion, dude, it's worth its weight in gold,
Yeah.
you know? So
Mm-hmm.
that might be like a good one where you're like, okay, because you will get pretty soon, I think, like for you, I think your business I mean, you're going to continue to grow and you'll probably at some point hit a point where you're like, ooh, this is like, yeah, I don't know how to answer this question, or I'm in over my head. And you will no doubt solve it. But you might be a point where you're like, oh, if I have, you have someone to like reach
Yeah.
out to discuss
Yeah.
that. Maybe there's value ahead of time. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the point where delegation is required, and there's more than just delegating like the making of the product. There's also
Yes.
there's only so many decisions that can be made by a person that are quality.
Right.
So it's like in a way bouncing ideas off, even if you're ultimately the one making the decision, having them reinforce decisions or dissect decisions maybe is like it's like a way of delegating to lower the decision fatigue. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I was thinking about this. So as it relates to me, I was thinking going into next year, like my number one focus, God, it's hard because it's not my main focus around the business, but it's like a house, like a non-negotiable thing.
Mm-hmm.
So really dialing in my finances was the kind of the last half of this year's goal.
Mm-hmm.
Did not meet the goal, but I think because of how I was approaching it and the tracking that I'm doing, it doesn't feel like I failed. And that is really interesting because I'm in the past I have been like pretty all or nothing, and I set like very
Mm-hmm.
large like aspirations, and then if I don't meet them, I'm incredibly hard on myself about that, and it's a failure.
Mm-hmm.
The change this year is like the realization that like the needle has been moved significantly,
Mm-hmm.
even though I miscalculated the time.
Yeah.
But we're really good at acknowledging failure, but not acknowledging change in situations. So like I look at it, I'm like, okay, we had my father come live with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a third child. I do not equate that into maybe why I would not have met some goal that I set for myself.
Yeah.
That's not my brain. But because of the tracking, I'm able to kind of like look back and see some of those things. So that, I think moving forward, that's kind of like my main focus. And that ties into the reframing the stress and like the like allotment of time, because I
Mm-hmm.
realize that like if my financial house is truly in order, it eliminates a huge kind of bubble of anxiety and stress,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Is there anything around your business that you feel like next year you're like, or this year, like refining, where you're like, this thing needs to be more set in stone or changed in some way?
I think we really rounded the corner on the current knives that we're making on our schedule structure because like
Yeah.
I said, we converted and it has like really washed away a lot of my demands for just like the amount of things hold on. The amount of times that I had to like think in the morning of a strategy for the day. It
Yeah.
was like every day I had to strategize, like, this is what we're gonna do, and then be like, oh wait, we're out of that.
Yeah.
Okay, strategy change. Now it's all like pre-laid out, pre-decided, and that I'm really happy about. But honestly, I think for 2024, honestly, we're getting erratic with our ability to handle our small amount of space.
Yeah.
It's getting to where no amount of organization can master like that small of amount of bench space. You know what I
Right.
mean? Maybe that's not true, but it feels that way. And so we're like feeling pretty aggressive about expanding our ability to spread out a little bit,
Yeah.
new shop. So it's just the things we're doing need more space.
More
Kind of full
space.
end of
Right.
story. Yeah.
How many models did you bring out this year?
So the Confidant doesn't fully count, but it actually began to ship this year.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
it launched like late last year,
Yep.
but I'll count it. There's a Confidant, Overland Sport, Turn,
That's good.
3 models.
3 models.
Yeah.
And I mean, arguably another model that is pretty far along in the process.
Yeah, so like the timeline of the LT5 is like similar to the timeline of the Confidant,
Yeah.
where it won't ship until Q1 of next
Yeah.
year, but it's
But it's
part of
close.
this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did our first collab this year.
Yes.
That's pretty
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, it was.
Your company did its first designer
Yep.
collaboration this year.
Yep.
That's pretty
Yep.
cool. I got the chance to be the first one, which is like,
Mhm.
we've like joked around about that so many times, like as it relates to like CRKT, where you're like, that's crazy. You're like, like an original that over
Mhm.
a long timeline that is very fun.
Yeah, yeah.
It's good, man.
Yeah, yeah, I'm feeling good. Feeling good. Just reflecting, you know.
Yeah. That's kind of, are you getting ready to like knock off for a few days, like the year?
Yeah, I
What's that
mean,
look like?
we got a pretty long weekend right now. I'm technically off today after
Nice.
this, and then Monday, Christmas, work 3 days, another long weekend because Monday's New Year's Day.
Nice. You're going to work
So,
next week though.
yeah, we'll
Yeah.
work 3 days in the shop, but we'll basically have 2 4-day weekends because we only
Nice.
work 4 day. We have a normal 4-day schedule, so if you have a Monday off, you have a 4-day
Yeah.
weekend. So a couple of 4-day weekends, and then yeah, see how I
It's
feel
good.
after that. But I do think a downshift's coming. I think
Yeah.
it's shaking out some of the tension around the holidays with the scheduling and all that, and then doing a downshift sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. We've got family coming in tonight. My plan is I'm gonna try to keep on like my morning work. I also have to be, I can't do overnights. Like family rented a house. I've got my dad at our house. I can't leave him overnight alone. So I think a lot of the nights I'm just going to be at home, but doing that like means that I can sleep, wake up super early, get a few hours working, and then go like hang out with the family more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to actually take like real time away. What's funny is doing this like work schedule. It actually doesn't feel like work. It just feels so organic.
Good.
And I feel like very early on, this might have been what it felt like. Where I wasn't aware that I was like at work doing like work things. I was just spending time the way I wanted to spend it.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed the ability to, because of starting so much earlier, just leaving earlier. It's that slight reframe. It's the same amount of time. It's just shifted.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to like carry those lessons. One thing I wanted to ask, any like as it relates to like the industry, you see any big things this year?
I'm gonna just call out the elephant in the room. There's been a slowdown.
Yeah,
I mean, I
definitely.
don't. If you're in the industry, you already know this.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know that it's totally evenly slowed down across the board, but the overall volume
Overall market.
is softer
Yeah.
than it was a year ago for
Yeah.
sure.
And you see this in multiple areas. So,
Yeah.
custom knives, it's really funny. Like recently, like a bunch of people have like posted up amazing collections
Yeah.
of knives, clearing it
Yeah.
out. And you're like, okay, it's just ebb and flow for
Yeah.
me. I don't feel one way or another about it. I think it's just like process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Production side, same.
Yep. Because
Right?
and I think I've talked about this before already on the pod, but like that I like was dwelling on that a little bit of like, okay,
Yeah.
the whole thing's moving. How do I integrate that into my calculations? How do I decide how to move? And I think I kind of weaned myself off of that. And so it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm going to mention that it exists, but again, I've got to stop with the negative thoughts. You know what I mean? It's not
Right.
like I feel like a negative person. It's just like questioning myself on every turn.
Yeah.
I've got to like stop doing that.
Here's what I know
You know?
about you as it relates to that. You're gonna figure it out. A plan that you set might not be the thing that you stick to
Mhm.
if you see something coming down the road that needs to change.
Yeah.
But I've watched you adapt how you work for the last decade. And that's the consistent. So the consistent is you have adapted and you
Mhm.
have changed, and there's
Right.
never been a point where you were going backwards. There's no reason to like look at
Yeah.
that now and be like, nope, this plan that I set, it's
Yeah.
written in stone. If the market
Yeah.
changes, I'm gonna die
Yeah.
on this hill. Not gonna happen. And
Right.
you might not even know that you're making a change.
Yeah.
Your brain's gonna come up with a different product
Yeah.
or a different
It's
collaboration or something.
I think I think I think where the line I like am trying to balance is like there's the confidence, arrogance
Yeah.
dilemma of
Yeah.
like I really hate arrogance when I feel like I'm being that way.
I know.
Like it's like something I've experienced before and it's something that I like really suppress, but
Yeah.
it's like you can suppress it to the point that you have no confidence too.
Yeah.
It's like how do you that I mean, what's the difference between the two? Is it a spectrum? I don't know, but like there's that kind of thing.
Well, related to kids, uh, you'll see this with your boy when he gets a little bit older. Like, dude, Bo will talk about how he is the best at something
Mm,
or how fast he is.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're like, that is confidence not backed by experience or ability.
yeah,
It's a different thing.
yeah.
And I'm not like
I mean, yeah.
I don't like talking shit about my kid
No, I know what
because
you're
he's
saying.
delightful, but it's
Yeah,
super funny to like watch
yeah,
him and a friend talk about the things that they are the best at,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know? We were at a friend recently that was talking about like their son plays little league and they're like, "Oh yeah, you hear him like he's just a ripper." That's like if you watch him, it's a very different scenario,
yeah,
but
yeah,
talk's a good talk.
yeah.
I think that maybe man, I struggle with the same thing. I I think it's the awareness of like what it has taken to do certain things and you're proud of it. But you're not proud of your pride, which is weird.
Hmm.
And that might relate to some of this concept of like not really acknowledging the things that you've done that are
Hmm.
positive. Um, but yeah, I totally get that. I mean, but at a point you're like, it's just confidence. So there's the other thing is if it's you're not making an argument. Like if you're showing the work is speaking for itself. That's the
Hmm.
and if you are proud of that, is that what you are looking at as arrogance because you're just
Hmm.
those are the moments where you're actually acknowledging what you're doing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. This really is a full circle because, like we just talked about, acknowledging the good things that happen.
Mhm.
It's like that runs against the words of like, "Don't read your own press." You know what I mean? It's like how do you reinforce yourself without becoming
I think that's different too. Like not
yeah,
buying into your own hype,
yeah, yeah,
that's important.
yeah,
I don't want to base my opinion off of what other people say about me, and that's true regardless of
mhm,
if it's good or bad. Okay?
yeah,
But I think outside of that, and you see that a lot. Like
mhm,
people buy their own hype.
mhm,
That's a good one to not do. But that doesn't have anything to do with you acknowledging what you are doing and your capabilities, and
right.
Don't be arrogant.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
You're like one of the least arrogant people I've ever met.
Well, I do appreciate that, because it's like
so true, man.
I mean, I don't know if I buy that, but like the reality is, like, there's something about that makes me really sick. Like arrogance in general.
Yeah, the fact that
it's
you're
like my
worrying
least
about
favorite
it.
human quality.
Yeah.
And it maybe to a point that it's not healthy. Like, I dislike it that much. Like, I don't know, but
the
I try
fact that you are worrying about it is probably indicative of the fact that that is not something that you are embodying as a personality trait.
I'll appreciate that.
Someone else that knows you well that is listening to this is also laughing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guarantee it. I don't know.
Good.
Man. Well, I had a great year recording this with you. We've missed, we've had like some pockets where we miss, but this is still proving to be like one of the more enjoyable outlets. Just a good,
it does have a
time.
feeling, like I talked about journaling. It does, especially episodes like this one. It has a journalistic characteristic.
Totally.
Of like, what'd you do this week? And it's like, well, let me think. It's like, well, this was good and this sucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's also it's kind of fun because like I struggle around social media because I don't always know what to post. And for a long time, it was like I posted the things that I'm working on. So if I don't have something that I'm working on that I'm super interested in, I have a hard time just posting a picture. Okay. This has been a nice reprieve from that, because it's like there's always something to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it's always something interesting. Doesn't mean it's something super relevant, but there's always something to talk about. And that process is enjoyable. And I think it leads to other conversations and other thoughts. And right there, that means there's value in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just,
Yeah. Yeah, it's been great. Let's
good.
do another year.
All right. One more. Do another. Man, that's crazy. I asked you said a year and a half?
Not about 18 months ish.
18 months.
It was after Blade Show in 2022
that we started.
It was like June.
And we are 50 some odd episodes in.
Yeah. Coming up on 60. We're like 57.
Coming up on 60.
Something like
that. We started a Patreon this year.
Yep.
Which we had talked about doing very early on.
Yeah.
That's like a great example. Like you and I have had very, like over the course of the last 18 months, like different ideas around the pod, and all of those have been slow. Right? Like if we looked at it and we're like, well, we didn't do this and this and this and this, it could be very easy to be like, well, we didn't get it done. But I actually don't feel like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just like very natural.
I think, it's a testament to the fact that we're not podcasters, we're knife makers.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's like the fact that it continues to exist, that alone is something we should be happy about. You know what I mean? Because it's not
the consistency.
Yeah.
Right. So the consistency there is the thing. Just actually sitting down and recording. So I guess to tie into that, like, James Clear quote, it's like, if we just keep doing this, like, where does this lead?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'll wrap it.
Let's call it.
Get it? Wrap it? Because it's the holidays.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Thank you guys for hanging out with us this year.
Catch you.
Everybody has a good holiday.
Catch you in 2024.
Oh, be safe on the roads.
Yep.
All right.
Enjoy family.
Yeah.
Peace.
Bye, guys.